Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Tim Carter. I'm president of Second Nature. We're a US-based nonprofit that has a mission to accelerate climate action in and through higher education. So this whole session is going to be about a different approach for us, actually an expanded view of what it looks like for higher education to take holistic climate action. I'm going to give a couple introductory remarks, and then we have a great panel here where we're going to have a conversation. Everyone says that in their panels, but we're really going to try to make this a conversation, and we are going to have time for you to ask questions. So as we go along, please do think about the questions you might have for the panel. Context for us, we're calling our new approach Climate Leadership 3.0. The only way to get to 3.0 is to understand 1.0 and 2.0, so I'm going to walk us through 1.0 and 2.0. For us, about 15 years ago, we had a program that was launched where presidents and chancellors of universities in the United States signed a commitment for their institutions to achieve operational carbon neutrality. So that was the first voluntary commitment of its kind, and it's the longest standing voluntary commitment to carbon neutrality for any sector in the world. It's one of the most successful initiatives. The way that happened was they made this institutional commitment. Let's see if these work here. We can just, oh, there we go. And the commitment actually had steps they had to do. So you had to take very concrete action. All these campuses developed climate action plans. They then report data, they developed greenhouse gas inventories and reported those data to us. And then every 5 years, they reviewed those plans to see how well they were doing. Since the time it was launched, we have about 900 institutions that signed this commitment in the US. So it's a significant number of schools. Right now we have 450 active schools. The reason that number is different is because if people didn't do what they said they're going to do, we actually removed them from the network. Or they left because they weren't doing as committed to climate action as what we thought they would be whenever they signed it. So that's the original approach. We can say then now, 15 years later, was this successful or not? We have data on this for 15 years. And when you actually look at that data, you can see that campuses that sign this commitment actually use 27% less energy and emit 47% less carbon than campuses that didn't sign the commitment. University of New Hampshire did this study back in 2015. So we know at some level it was successful. But it was largely an initiative focused on operational decarbonization. So that was Climate Leadership 1.0, is this focus on our campus is going to be able to practice what they teach. Will they do climate action the way that they teach their students about climate action? And we've said, like, yes, that is true, that does happen. The next phase in 2015 is we really wanted to push into adaptation and resilience. And so we introduced a commitment to that effect where the same thing happened. Presidents and chancellors committed to take these resilience actions. And we started to see now campuses working with their communities on these climate actions in new and different ways. So in this case, Eastern Connecticut State University worked with the town of Windham to develop this resilience assessment and ultimately a plan for resilience in their community. And this is kind of the second version of climate leadership, what we're calling Climate Leadership 2.0. And sorry, this is a little delay here. I'm exposing you to the future. Another example of that resilience was the University of California, Los Angeles worked on a Grand Challenge initiative with the city of Los Angeles. So it's very much connecting not just the operational decarbonization work on campus, but now in 2015 it was let's lean into community a little bit harder. So this was 2.0. This is Climate Leadership 2.0. And so now we're at this point of saying, what does it look like moving forward? What does the next version of climate leadership look like for us? And this is where Climate Leadership 3.0 comes in. One of the things we learned from these 15 years is that the way these commitments operate is that it actually treats every single institution as if they have the same set of strengths and the same set of opportunities for climate action. And that's just not true. Like, that's not the reality, especially in the US, but I imagine also in Mexico as well. When you have a lot of different institution types, each institution has a different set of strengths that it needs to mobilize in order to make climate action more effective wherever they happen to be. So in the upper slide here, you see this idea of the commitments drive uniformity. So if you're an R1 or a research institution, or if you're a CC, a community college, or if you're a historically black college and university, in the US, for our program, it treated all of them as if they were the same, and we just added those impacts together. So that creates a uniform impact. It scales, but it actually doesn't recognize the complementarity that could take place between those institution types. And it's that theme of complementarity that really anchors this idea of climate leadership 3.0, and that applies not just to institution type, but also to roles within the university. So we think about, in our case, we had presidents and chancellors that initiated this commitment, but there's other types of roles within the university that are really critical for climate leadership. You can think of both faculty and students, but also other types of staff. And if you don't recognize the role that those leaders play, you're going to miss opportunities to, again, complement those other roles within the university. So this complementarity is a theme of Climate Leadership 3.0 that we're going to be weaving into our network design in the future. So this kind of summarizes it for us. Complementarity between institution types, between roles within the institution, and also, more important to this pavilion actually, is between sectors outside of higher education. So given the strengths that you might have as an institution, how are you well positioned to help with the climate goals your community might have? That's going to look different if you're a research university, if you're a small liberal arts school, if you're a community college. It's going to be very different in your geography. And if you're in a different country, there might be different types of institutional models in higher education that also have different strengths. And so the focus of our discussion is really about how this complementarity looks in practice. Like, what does it look like to enable this Climate Leadership 3.0 model? And that's why we've brought together people that are at different types of institutions and people with different types of roles within those institutions. And that's what we're going to focus the rest of this panel on, is under this frame of Climate Leadership 3.0, how does higher ed actually get mobilized more effectively, more efficiently moving forward? So I'm going to hand it off now to each of the panelists, and they're going to give a little bit of an introductory remarks about their own campus, how it fits into 3.0, and then we'll have some discussion, and very much do ask questions as we go along. So first is David Feingold from Chatham University.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I here in really two roles. One is as the chair of those more than 450 institutions that have made the commitment to go to net zero for Second Nature. And the second is as the president of Chatham University in Pittsburgh. At Chatham, we like to say we were into sustainability before it was cool. Our campus is an arboretum, but it's located right in the heart of Pittsburgh. So you can see in the distance there, 15 minutes from downtown. It may be you recognize this campus because we sort of fit Hollywood's version of what a college campus should look like. So the show The Chair that was on a couple of summers ago, that was filmed at Chatham and one of our partners here in Pittsburgh. We've been around for over 150 years. We're about 50-50 undergraduate and graduate. And we have a real mission commitment for all of our students and faculty around sustainability and social justice. We were one of the first to make the commitment to get to net zero. Our target is by 2025. But the real way we've made that a tangible part of the university was back in 2016. We built the greenest campus in the U.S. at Eden Hall to be the home for our Falk School of Sustainability. the campus is really designed as a living learning model of what a more sustainable future might look like. So we have 4 different types of renewable energy system, microgrids, we have an aquaponics facility, organic agriculture, focus on air quality, which is a big issue in Pittsburgh, and how to work with our community and business partners to build a greener future for not just Chatham, but for the whole of the region. As a result, we've been recognized as one of the greenest of all of the small universities in the U.S., and all of this is really a tribute to our most famous alum, Rachel Carson, who really gave birth to the modern environmental movement. And her words, now more than 60 years old, I think are equally, if not more, true today. That we have 2 choices for our future, and we're heading down the wrong path right now. That's why we're all here at the COP. What we desperately need is a whole new generation of Rachel Carsons who are committed to building a more sustainable future, and that's what we're seeking to build at Chatham. So I'll now turn it over to Michelle to continue the conversation.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you very much, David. My name is Cynthia Villarreal. I am Director of Sustainable Development at Tec de Monterrey. Tec de Monterrey is a private, non-for-profit university in Mexico. It has 26 campuses around the country, all the way from the north to the south, east, and west. We have 90,000 students in the system. We have 2 hospitals. We have 10,000 professors and staff. We have 32 research groups. And we are a very connected society, very connected very connected university to the private sector. We are probably the most connected university to the private sector. We're very different from Chatham, very unique university, very focused on technology, very well known for technology and innovation. I would like to talk a little bit about Ruta Azul, which is how the university, as big and complex as it is, has managed to articulate the university's efforts into one big plan. But why? Why did we do this plan? We've been doing sustainability for years, not as many years as Chatham, but throughout the decades, Tec de Monterrey has pushed forward throughout the schools, throughout the different campus sustainability projects. And well, all the science, all the recent information about the climate emergency that's going on right now, it motivated us to do commitments. Important commitments such as being signatories of the Race to Zero campaign, signing the Hamburg Declaration, where we committed to different types of actions such as achieving carbon neutrality, educating in sustainable development, mobilizing resources for research. This is a Race to Zero, which was the... I'm also giving you a peek into the future. Okay. So the Hamburg Declaration, research, education. Our plan goes beyond and above. Okay, there. Research and education and carbon neutrality. What makes us unique is putting culture in the center of our efforts. Culture in the heart of everything else. And through culture, we connect and feedback every other aspect of our plan that goes around our university system. Mitigation, where we seek to reduce our ecological footprint in our campuses, water, gases, and waste specifically. Adaptation, how are our 26 campuses adapting to the impacts in education? How is every single student going to have information about climate change and sustainability? Research, are we going to mobilize resources for research to find solutions? How are we going to use our campus as living labs for this research and outreach, which gets to the important point here about how we are a very connected university to the private sector and to governments, and especially to subnational governments in where our region is. So what I don't know how many people what's going on here, but what's important here is that this plan involves each and every one of us. In a university as big and as complex as Tec de Monterrey, you need to involve everybody. And it's not an easy task when you have different campuses, different 6 schools. You have obviously HR and finance. You have the operations that are going on in the campuses. You have the schools, the student activities, and then you have all the external community, the outreach. So here are just a few examples of all the different areas that we need to get involved with. And what's interesting, and I think what makes us unique about this, is because we have put culture in the center, it's really important for everybody to be involved. And to be able to do this, our plan has 2 leadership. From the highest level, I co-lead this plan with a colleague who is in the Chief Operations Office, but we are both accountable for the whole of the plan. Just to sum up, we are very involved with alliances and networks. Maybe we can discuss that later. I mean, Second Nature, of course, has been key to our linking and to being here today. Thank you, Tim. And just to quickly wrap up what we have been able to do in just a year since we launched our plan. We were able to reduce by 28% our greenhouse gas emissions. I mentioned we have 2 hospitals. We were able to have 100% of renewable energies in the 2 hospitals, which, as I'm sure you know, they're very high consumers of energy. So this was a very big effort. And just through articulating a plan such as this, we were able to climb 178 positions in the Green Metrics ranking. And finally, what makes us happier and probably the most proud is our work with, it says 14, but now it's 16 municipalities around Monterrey who have, thanks to the efforts of motivating our working with the mayors of the municipalities, we were able to get them to sign the Race to Zero campaign. So they have committed themselves, 16 municipalities around Nuevo León, to be carbon neutral by the latest 2050. So this has been probably the most important step forward in our outreach within our relationship with the subnational governments. And this is where I end my presentation and pass the microphone to Beth. Okay, you keep it.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having joining us all here this afternoon. So my name is Beth Martin, and I am a teaching professor at Washington University in St. Louis, and I also at the university direct our climate change program. Also, as part of our work here, Washington University is as part of the University Climate Change Consortium, which is UC3. It's Friday at the end of COP week, so please bear with me. I'm struggling with my sentences today. So it's a consortium of universities in Canada, United States, and Mexico who are working together to think about how are we as universities helping catalyze climate action in our communities. And so how are we thinking about what those cross-sectoral questions and needs are, and how do we actually begin to meaningfully engage in that space? So what I want to talk about today is an initiative called the Midwest Climate Collaborative that we at WashU, as part of our work with UC3 and as part of our commitment to cross-sectoral action, have launched in the last year. So as a brainchild of myself and several others of us at WashU, a benefit of our university is we were able to get support to get this going. In an ideal world, in a couple of years, it will exist kind of separate from the university. So So one of the things within the Midwest, so in the United States, within the Midwest, It's 12 states. It's an often ignored part of the country that we see at times, but yet at the same time, if you look at our global emissions, we're quite significant in terms of global emissions. So what is our vision and our vision and our mission? To be a carbon neutral, climate resilient, interconnected Midwest region. And the way in which we're thinking about that from a collaborative perspective is thinking about how do we accelerate climate action, how do we strengthen knowledge generation and leadership development. And so as we're just beginning, it's been really, really important to us that we are a true collaborative. It's not just us telling everybody else what to do, but we're really thinking about how are we developing our governance structure, how are we thinking about our members, how are we kind of building from the ground up. So our partners, as we launched, this is our list of our founding members. We have local governments, we have NGOs, we have universities, we have private sector, and that was really important to all of us because this question of how do we really advance climate action? How do we implement, right? This is the implementation COP. How do we think about implementation? And I think we do that by working collectively within our communities. So I'm going to kind of go quickly through a couple of these slides and can come back. These are a little bit of why does the Midwest matter, but I'll come back to those. I want to talk specifically, as we're launching as a collaborative, we have 6 separate projects that are starting to work. And as a collaborative, we really kind of think about what is it that our members need, and how do we think about connecting people within the university to help meet and fulfill, in the university, in the collaborative, help fulfill and meet those needs. So we have the Midwest Climate Research Agenda, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. We have an educator community of practice, and in educators, we're thinking about education, both higher education, K-12 education, community education. What's happening is we're thinking about like zoos, lots of places where there's education and community education interaction. We're working to connect students across the Midwest through a student sustainability conference in terms of, that is mainly higher education students. The others, climate ambassadors, climate asset map ambassadors, how are we thinking about taking or having a structure in place which we have technical expertise and we know where it is and how do we help match make and figure out how to translate that technical expertise when there's needs in the community. Climate asset map, how do we know who's doing what where? I mean, I don't know about any of you, but at my university, which compared to tech, it's pretty small, we still don't know who's doing what where, right? So how do we know if we're thinking about we're a collaborative, how do we know who's doing what where so that we can tap into, and share expertise and work more broadly? And then also thinking about what are our individual institutional climate commitments. So in the Midwest Climate Agenda, what we're trying to really think about is how do we bridge this connection of research and practice. Oftentimes, thinking about a research agenda that's driven in part by what are the practice needs. Now, in some cases, those practice needs are already met and answered, but there's still a lack of how do we make that connection. In other cases, it helps to really inform the research community to sit and develop a joint research plan with that community. So we're working right now to the idea being, and we modeled this off of something that was done in the state of Georgia in the United States where they did something similar. So we're really thinking about pulling together, not thinking about, we're actually doing, right? Having a working group that has a call out. What are your research needs? What are the questions that you would like to see answered? The idea is that we'll pull all of those together and that we'll be able to then help support, move forward, match people up, look for funding, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're asking as we're generating these questions is what research question, if answered, would substantially advance our understanding of climate impacts and solutions within the Midwest? And then what would help you do the work you need? Like what research support do you need to do the work that you need? What we're seeing as questions are coming in, because we're in the phase of this project where questions are still coming in, we're seeing themes, and this is not surprising in the Midwest, of agriculture, decarbonization, policy, built environment, renewable energy, carbon sequestration, and also messaging. How do we think and talk about climate change? In our part of the United States, it's often a bad word. And so how do we think about and talk about it in a way that helps motivate action? Okay, and so to learn more, the Midwest Climate Collaborative, I'm also happy to, we'll engage in a discussion and have more questions, so.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. So I think what we heard was 3 different models. So like small, environmentally driven an identity of an institution. A massive, like you're working with 14, 16 municipalities, and you actually shaped what those municipalities did. And then almost like anti-institution, you know, like you're trying to do this collaborative thing, which like Wash U takes a back seat, right? So I would love for you to think about in your specific geographies, and just answer this question, in what ways, you talked about your own institution, but in what ways can you work with the other institutions that aren't like you? So if you're little, what about the big people? If you're big, what about the little people? And if you're an anti-institution, what about your own institution? Like, so think about the opposite of what you just presented, and does that give us some insight into what that collaborative arrangement could look like? And we can do whatever order you want.
Sure. So for Pittsburgh, you really have to understand the history of the city to be able to answer the question. So we were the birth of steel, right? It was an industry, it was the heavy manufacturing city of the world, and it's been transformed into an eds and med city that's committed to getting to net zero.
What's eds and med?
Education and medicine is the real drivers of employment in the city. And so a core part of that reinvention of the city, cleaning it up, getting it focused, is the universities coming together. So there are 11 colleges and universities, 80,000 plus students in a city of 300,000. So it's a huge part of it. And so even though Chatham is tiny, I chair the 11 colleges and universities, and their commitment to this is, it crosses everything, not just their operations, their employees, but you know, CMU is generating a lot of the new, Carnegie Mellon University, one of the leading universities in the world for AI, computer science, robotics, and so they're generating a whole set of new solutions there. University of Pittsburgh next door, likewise, a major R1 research university with this commitment. And so I think working together, but addressing the climate justice issues as well, because there's such deep divisions within a relatively small city in terms of how they're impacted by climate. And so we're trying to do it with a lens toward not just benefiting our direct constituencies, but addressing the stakeholders who are really being most harmed.
So do then your students get involved with like CMU issues because they're all kind of connected together on topical things, but you know, since you have this strong student population at a liberal arts school, that's like the contribution you're making isn't like massive research. Yeah, it's the student thing. So yeah, would love to hear kind of a similar thinking around that.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for this very interesting question. I wouldn't say that we're big and somebody's small. I think I would say that we are all different and we all have different strengths and weaknesses at the same time. And for example, working with the governments, the subnational governments, what we as a university have been able to provide to this community or this society of actors is obviously goes beyond what universities are famous for, or just the nature of universities, about education, about research, even about entrepreneurship, which I think this is a whole other conversation that I wouldn't have time to discuss. But sorry. But I think what universities, a university with the characteristics as Tec de Monterrey, what we can do is we can facilitate or catalyze climate action within our extended communities. And when I say extended, it's within our municipality or state, sometimes even our country.
But how do you do so that catalyzing that function that you have? Maybe you're like Chatham's not going to be as influential as you are, but you're super influential, and so that's how you serve as a catalyst. So how specifically do you do that in those different places?
Yes, for example, well, as I said, we're very connected with the private sector. So through the private sector, we catalyzing For example, we are having leadership programs for big companies for their leadership to be leaders in sustainability and climate change at the CEO level, and this is very important. And for example, through the for the communities, we are actually in the America is all in pavilion with the Alliances for Climate Action. We were co-founders with WWF for the Alliance for Climate Action in Monterrey. And through this alliance that we helped form, we started collaborating with the municipal governments. So this is how we started connecting. Perla here was leading the Alliance for Climate Action. Now she's part of Tec de Monterrey.
So you hire people from the initiatives that you start.
That's
is the lesson.
a best practice, but I wouldn't say that too much. So yes, and then we connect not only with the government and to promote their action plans. Actually, right now we are working with them to promote the subnational or the metropolitan area action plan. Climate action plan. And we helped also motivate a metropolitan vision more than just a municipality vision, because obviously air pollution does not stop within one municipality, and no. So we because we are trusted actors in our community, we are influential. We provide safe spaces. We can convene the actors that obviously come from different political parties and have the conversation and motivate in a way that few other institutions would have this trust and would have this convening power. So I think this is something that universities with the characteristics and maybe even smaller universities can have this, provide these safe spaces for climate action.
Those are so great examples. With industry, that's a new one. And then this way that you work with government is really fascinating. You mentioned weaknesses, but you didn't then say examples of weaknesses. What are like the main weaknesses of being a large university that you may need to rely on somebody else to cover that weakness? Can you think of those weaknesses?
Probably one of the weaknesses about being so large is that things may be so dispersed, and sometimes it's hard to know what we are all doing. It's always, not sometimes, always very hard to know what everybody is doing, and so there is this need to articulate better, and based on this need, which is a weakness, we started this strength. We are starting this plan to articulate and be able to multiply efforts, and some efforts. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. It makes me think of your issue, Beth, about like, how do you know what the left hand is doing or the right hand is doing? Do you think of that as, you presented it as an opportunity with this asset map? How about at WashU? Do you find that to be the case, that knowing what the rest of the university is doing is fairly difficult?
So at WashU, particularly as an institution, one of the things that at least I found when I started working in the climate area is that so many people don't define themselves as doing climate work, but then when you start to have a conversation, you realize their work has there's implications of climate change on their work, and their work has implications on climate change. And so for us at WashU, starting to have that conversation of, yes, you're doing research in forest ecology and you're looking at trees. There are climate change implications. Well, of course there are. So but I'm not doing climate change work. So just to start thinking broadly about how climate change really implicates and has its fingers throughout all of the research done. And I'll say not just research in the sciences, research in the humanities and the social sciences. There's important spaces for thinking about climate change in all of that.
It might be a good example of the way in which a program design outside the university might catalyze more activity inside the university. So I wanted to pivot a little bit into roles, like different types of roles. Oftentimes we think of the president's the only person that can initiate anything, but at a university it's like not at all true. Like if you initiate something, that actually might elevate to this priority that the university sees. That's really important. We're going to focus on that strategically. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the ways in which the roles within the university might complement one another, whether it's at your own institution, or David, you mentioned serving on chairing a committee of other probably leaders in the community. What complementarity do we see between roles that could be maybe more optimized or maximized?
So one of the things I think about, I shared that I'm teaching faculty. So my primary focus at the university is academic, but not even in the research sector, really in the teaching sector. But in that context, I work really closely with my chair, who is a research faculty. I work really closely with my colleague, who's in operations. And, at our university, in some ways, they haven't gotten in our way, maybe I should say, as we start to say that we need to regularly talk about what's happening in operations, what's happening in the classroom, and what's happening in the research space, and how do we make sure all three of those are working and talking together. Our Vice Chancellor of Operations now teaches a class on renewable energy, and that's really important because in his class he's able to have students do a community project where they engage with, for example, our local city or our local county on how they're moving renewable energy forward. And so then you start to see that connection between the classroom, the operations, the community, and we really fundamentally believe, and that's partly what led to kind of this idea of the collaborative and starting to do this forward, is you've got to work across sectors within the university, and we have to work across sectors within the community, and really tap into the strengths. It makes no sense at all to do repeat work and have the same people doing the same thing in different places. And Tim he mentioned that kind of anti-institution comment. That I don't want to get back to my institution, but I think what it is just recognizing the value in each institution, and how Tim said, they all have unique abilities and unique ways in which to contribute. And so thinking about what is it that one institution doesn't have all the answers, nor should it, right? One institution, you need to really think about what are the strengths across institutions. What do the teachers, or what are the interpretive specialists at the zoo that are talking day to day on people who just come to the zoo? What are they seeing and learning about climate change communication? And how do we take that and think about that in a K-12 classroom? How do we think about that in a university classroom? How do we think about it in training and teaching our faculty, right? And so there is just this thread that goes throughout that we really want to be able to tap into.
So regarding your question about the roles, right? It's very important to listen to all the voices, and everyone has a different role. Students have a very important role in our university, and sometimes it's hard to listen to their voices when you are sitting in your office or in the offices, right? And vice versa. So we have sort of what we think is the best way, or so far what we have found is that we are building committees where in every campus, for example, we have a student involved with the operations manager, with the student activities, or we call it life, or the leadership student activities, right? And also the academia representative. So there is a representative from every area, functional area, including a student. And then the students are also forming a committee that reports to us in Ruta Azul, just in terms of environmental. And of course, the roles of our president and our leadership is very important, and it's just a day-to-day work of listening to everybody's voices and involving everybody. And because it gets difficult, but because it's so big and so complex, but when you form a structure and it's starting to work, it's new, but I think that's what's valuable.
Yeah, and I think one of the fun things about being a president is you wear a lot of hats at once. So 3 big roles I see in this. One is really addressing the issue you both mentioned of it's hard to know just what everything is going on. Well, you're really the only one in the university who has the whole institution, and so I've often heard it described as a bucket carrier or a connector. So someone's doing something cool here, either someone else in the university or outside that could really benefit from working together, making that introduction. A second is as a generator of resources. So where faculty or a dean come up with a great idea. So we're, sort of on the Rachel Carson legacy, we're partnering with the National Aviary that's based in Pittsburgh to be part of a conservation center. And so a big part of my job is to go raise the money to make that happen. And then I think a third one is higher ed. People are so busy now just keeping up with the day-to-day, but the sector is really challenged. And so looking out beyond the horizon 5 years or more and trying to understand what are the future trends, how is everything that's happening with climate, how's that going to impact us, and then looking for ways to position the institution to benefit from that. So we're building an eco-village on our campus. So it's trying to think about multi-generational learning and how do you bring new resources, and that took like seeing where's worked best around the country and how can you leverage that too.
And I want to take that to flip this back to everyone in the audience and say, what sorts of ideas or practices do you have going on your campuses that meet this kind of climate leadership 3.0 approach? So this idea of we have a specific strength on climate that maybe some of this discussion helped me think of that I would want to more, pay more attention to as I leave this event. So I'd love to hear, yeah.
Thank you so much for the panel. Hi, Beth. My name is Bashar. We had a conversation over email earlier. I'm from Bangladesh.
And you're from British Columbia, the University of British Columbia.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Nice
It's
to
good to
meet
see you.
So I'm from the University of British Columbia. We have a sustainability wing there, which is very active. It engages with professors and different other faculty members, staff, and students. So we have a wing called Sustainability Ambassadors, who are basically getting involved, learning about climate change from 5 different angles. So we have civic engagement, justice, then social impact, and all the other angles that you can think about. And we go through different modules and learning, and there are lots of hands-on learning as well. I also worked for the Social Impact Lab at UBC last summer. And what we did there is we have a separate thing called Climate Action Mobilizers. So we go to different communities in Greater Vancouver area and host workshops. And at these workshops, there are folks who are like 60 years old, and there are folks who go to kindergarten, and they engage with us. And we as a university, we act as our institute as knowledge. We share our knowledge with these communities and how these communities can play a role in mitigating climate change and the effects of climate change. So I'm very interested to hear about other folks as well. I'm sorry I'm taking a lot of time to share about my thoughts, but yeah, we are doing a lot of work in Greater Vancouver area. I really would recommend you folks to check out UBC Sustainability.
That's great, and that's a new idea around Climate Leadership 3.0 is different types of topics that you just mentioned. So it's not just about operational decarbonization, it's about justice, it's about community engagement, it's about all these different ways in which climate leadership topically can manifest itself on campus, not just institution type, not just role, but also thematic area. And the fact that you're doing that at UBC is a great example of that. What other examples do we want to run through? We have a few more minutes. Or questions that you might have for the audience. Oh, Beth.
Well, I just have a question for my fellow panelists, but I'm waiting to see if there's any other questions from the audience. So.
How many times at COP do you get asked to ask examples for yourself when you're not on the panel? Oh, Lee Ball, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee Ball. I'm with Appalachian State University in Western North Carolina in the United States. We're just starting something called the Mycelium Project, and it is really trying to map out and characterize all the mutualism on campus, whether it's the student engagement and the research and the operations and the fundraising and the leadership development, so that we can see it all in sort of one place. I'm trying to come up with this three-dimensional holograph thing that can track it. But so if anyone knows about that, let me know.
Isn't Microsoft a sponsor here? Maybe get some AI going on. I love that name, the Mycelium Project. That's beautiful. Any other examples before we get to Beth's question? You had one?
I'll just like start being my. You got it? Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Rain. I'm also from the University of British Columbia, but I'm going to come from a different angle than Bashar because I'm studying engineering, and we have something that's unique to UBC, which are engineering design teams. So these are like clubs, but students get to pitch their own idea, and then we do get funding from our faculty to continue the project year after year. And for me, I think this is really important because it gives students a sense of ownership. It's not the university giving us ideas, it's students coming up with them. So my team is called Waste Knots, and we focus around circular economy. So we have 5 different projects that we manage as students. It's been a really cool experience so far.
It's a great example of sourcing. Where do we source our content as universities? And if we're doing projects with a municipality, oftentimes it's, oh, we are the university, we know what you need, municipality. And in fact, that's not true at all. You have to ask what we call demand-driven research. So what does the actual user of the research need before you actually create the research project? And the student-driven projects, so we don't like tell students, here's what you should do. It's like, well, maybe the students have brilliant ideas, because obviously you do. That's awesome.
Well, that actually kind of connects to my question to the panelists, but also to the audience. And I think negotiators are grappling with this throughout COP, right? And it's money. It's finance and it's money. And so if you think about the collaborative that we're working in, you're looking at cross sectors, and you're looking at ways in which people access money and they access funds in different ways. And academia itself can be pretty competitive when it comes to money. So how do you start to work collaboratively together to get grants, to get funding, to figure out how are we financing and paying for all of these really good ideas? So I just kind of want to point that out because it is something that we think about. You know, we're very fortunate. We were able to just receive, the collaborative was an NSF grant because it's looking at cities, tree cover, and heat. So it was able to partner with institutions in a city that had a partner that would work together. But then you think about how do you allocate those funds and how do you make it work? So I just kind of wanted to pose that to my fellow panelists and also to the audience to think about how do we pay for everything?
Yeah, and maybe David, you brought up funding as your role, so give us the answer.
Well, I would just say I think the grant you got is an example of what we're seeing more and more of. So I know Pittsburgh, we're blessed with a lot of pretty well-endowed foundations, and they really put an emphasis and reward folks who don't just say, please give to my institution or my program, but who are trying to do it in a collaborative way because...
So what I'm hearing you say is the fact that you're working collaboratively and you're working across a sector can actually be a benefit or an advantage when looking to secure funds.
Yeah, because I think if you show you're a good steward of funds, and the other thing they're looking for, so your work with municipalities, right, it's what's the concrete benefit that's coming from the work you're doing. And so if it's driven by real problems that are being experienced in the community and you have solutions for it, I think that's what secures additional resources.
Yeah, I'd like to illustrate this with a very, very interesting and valuable project that we are working on right now. It's Arroyo Vivo. It means live or living stream, and the name of the stream actually is Arroyo Seco, which is dry stream. This is a very polluted stream in Monterrey, and so there is a project. It's a multi-sectorial, a community-based project, climate action project, that is co-founded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, by tech through our resources, and by the by the private sector through our foundations that we have very close ties with, Fundación FEMSA, and it's about regenerating this urban stream and developing an inclusive recycling program. So the people that are are cleaning and having a livelihood out of cleaning the stream now are organized, and the municipality is very involved in this project. And it's a very concrete example of something that has impact on our climate, because the stream goes obviously at the end of the day to the ocean. It has plastic waste and a lot of many types of waste. It has social impact because it has this inclusive recycling program model. And obviously everybody is pitching in, and everybody is putting their competencies and their strengths in there to have this project to live. So this is another way. When you have a very good project, funding comes. Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, hello. My name is Cheyenne. I'm from the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. That acronym is SDSN. And this concept of collaboration is kind of our whole purpose. So we are a network of universities. We have regional, in the Amazon. We also have national, like USA, like Canada, all around the world. And so we're kind of hoping to bring together these different types of universities so that we're not recreating the wheel. We're working together. We had a few members work together to apply for the NSF grant. So just want to let people know that if they are looking to find ways to collaborate, to work together, we're trying to connect right now people to San Diego, who just released a regional decarbonization framework, and we worked with them on that, and we're trying to recreate that in other cities. So that's kind of what we're looking to do, is to bring everyone together. So just mentioning that the collaboration aspect is a big part of what we do, and we're hoping to bring more people on.
Yeah, it's great. And this idea of networks themselves, like the Midwest Climate Collaborative, like SDSN, like the Climate Leadership Network, UC3, and Tech is part of however many, 30 of those, there's a ton of power in it. And we need funders to understand that funding networks actually can be the bang for the buck opportunity, rather than funding WashU, Tech, Chatham individually. They might actually be able to get some broader impact and scale their impact with that type of investment.
And I would say that goes both for funding networks, but also for institutions to recognize, right? There's value to share the wealth and to share the money.
Yeah, and we don't have any development people here but we need to convince them. That's who we need to talk to. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. We're a few minutes early, but it'll give us time to transition. I would just say one last thing. We have a reception here for those of you who are part of higher ed institutions, and even if you're not and you want to come, you can come. 6:30 in this pavilion tonight, and we would love to continue these sorts of conversations here, and would welcome your participation in that. Thank you so much to the panel. This has really been fascinating, and great job with those contributions, and thank you for all the comments you've given. Thanks, everybody.